Okay. So hello and welcome. I welcome each and every one of you in this live streaming session. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is KP Singh and I'm joined today by Shreyas Datar. Shreyas has secured All India rank 7 and all of you, rather many of you would know him from the previous session that we conducted on IMS Get Set Law channel. So once again, Shreyas Datar, I welcome you to IMS Get Set Law. And we'll start this session with congratulating you for this huge achievement. So you have made us all proud. Chale, so Pari, let's start with this question. How are you feeling right now? Has the euphoria ended or you're still in this mode of excitement?
First of all, I'm glad to be here and for a second time with IMS. And thank you so much for your wishes. As far as the euphoria is concerned, or as our law professors call it, Clat hangover, that is still there sort of because of the interviews and everything. But yeah, I mean, at some point of time, it has to subside because as it said, Clat is just the first stepping stone towards a larger journey.
Very, very well put. Well, buddy, what I want to know is that when did this idea pop up in your head for the very first time? Like, when did you decide that law is something that I want to aspire to get into?
Right. So very honestly, it was about a year before the CLAT. The CLAT exam took place. That must be around July to August of 2020, when I actually decided that I will pursue law, and that's when I looked up IMS. I joined IMS, and ever since then, all the sectional tests, all the mock tests, and all of that began. The intensity kind of heated up in the last 4 5 months. So to be honest, I knew I wanted to do law for about a year, but I was intensely focused on CLAT for about 5 6 months. That's from February, March till July.
Many students devote, let's say, 2 to 3 years to crack this exam. And what I could get from your previous interaction is that you are crediting more to whatever you did in last 3 to 4 months. Is that correct? Okay. That is the reason that we started receiving so many requests from so many students that we really want to know that what actually went in those last 3 months. So we'll get to that part later on. Acha, tell me a bit about your family background. Like, who all are there? Or do you have any siblings?
No, so I don't have any siblings. I'm a single child, but everyone in my family, nearly everyone is a doctor. So of course, there was this sort of a question that was always asked: Are you going to do medicine? Are you going to give NEET? But that was not the case. I never actually thought about NEET. So I joined JE classes in my 11th grade, and for a few months, or even in 10th grade or 9th grade, I focused on PCM, physics, chemistry, and maths. But I even had PCM for 11th and 12th. But yeah, when I will graduate, I definitely become a first generation lawyer because no one in my immediate family is a lawyer.
So how is your family taking this information as of now? Like, first generation lawyer, are they supportive, or was there any sort of, let's say, resistance from your family? Doctor Banja, why are you going for something new?
No, definitely not. So they've always been very supportive of my pursuit, even when I wanted to do engineering, maybe some other degree, and in the last 1 year law. They've been very supportive, and they've also been they've welcomed it very gladly and happily that I am pursuing law at a school like NLSI Bangalore, also my CLAT score. So I think they're very happy with it and very supportive too.
Okay. So, Shreyash, you are a fresher. That means you cracked CLAT along with your class 12th exam, correct?
Right.
Wow. So, what many of these would love to know that how did you balance between these two, sailing two ships together?
Well, admittedly, our batch got a bit lucky there because we did not have to give our 12 standard boards. It got cancelled. But I mean, if you look at it from a purely a point of view of a CLAT 2022 aspirant, then the announcement of our boards being cancelled came in May. So effectively, till May, I was studying for my board exam as I would have had the board actually been conducted. So I got around 2 months exclusively for CLAT. And that's something that will be followed even next year. So yes, I think my answer still holds some relevance to future aspirants. As far as preparing for boards and CLAT is concerned, I divided my day into two. So as I said, I had PCM. So my board syllabus was completely different from my CLAT syllabus. However, with proper time management, dividing your days into two, I think it's possible. Because I was in Maharashtra State Board, it wasn't much of a workload because the syllabus is a bit easy, on the easy side. So I used to devote either my mornings or the later half of the day to boards, and either the first half of the day or the later half of the day to Clat, depending on what is closer. So if my board exam is closer, the first half would be for the boards because I need to be fresher for that. However, make sure that you keep up the stamina throughout the day, keep up the consistency throughout the day. So even if you devote the latter part of your day to Clat, you're not supposed to slog about it or feel complacent after your board's preparation is done.
Okay. So you divided your day into 2 equal halves. So morning slot, let's say first half, you were focusing on your class 12th, and in second half, you're focusing more on your entrance exam, right? So let's go a bit more into details. So which subject did you find most troublesome, and which areas did you find easier to crack?
Yeah, so in Clat, as far as Clat is concerned, the most difficult subject for me was quantitative aptitude because it was very lengthy. It was very, it required a lot of number crunching. It required a lot of data interpretation. It took time. So that was the most difficult part for me. However, the thing about here, the caveat is that quantitative aptitude has only 15 marks. So it has a lesser weightage than the other subject. So uh, I would say I did not focus very, very intensely on quantitative aptitude. I was, as I also mentioned, a score of 7 to 8, I think is very good as far as quant is concerned. And that's what I aim for. I knew I'm not going to get 15 in that. So as far as I'm getting, I was always getting 7, 8. So from that perspective, I would call it very difficult because I was getting what I expected to get in there. So apart from quantitative aptitude, it was the critical reasoning section that I found very, very difficult. So even 5 months before my Clat preparation, Clat exam, I was scoring miserably low on the CR section. Even the IMS textbooks that we had, the passages were quite long and quite detailed or had some abstract philosophical concepts too. So I think at that point of time, I was scoring, if the section was 30, and I was scoring about 10 or 12. However, I think those complex passages or those even those low scores for that matter helped me a lot because if you score low, you analyze it more intensely. And if you have a difficult passage, a very abstract philosophical passage, you sort of put in more efforts. So apart from the quant section, critical reasoning and logical reasoning was definitely the hardest section for me. And I somehow managed to go from like 10 in February because of constant practice, near everyday practice of at least 5 to 6 passages apart from the mocks, apart from about 1 or 2 mocks, 5, 6 passages. So I think that's how I managed to get my score from 10 to 27.5 in the actual exam.
Okay. So Quant, we know how you handled it now. But what about other areas? Like reading became the most crucial skill this year, isn't it? So did you work on it? Did you try to improve your reading speed? Which method or what tricks did you apply?
All right. So reading speed is very, very important. Let me put that at the outset. It's very important for Clat. Reading fast. As they say, Clat is a reader's exam. So I used to feel sometimes lazy reading about it. I used to read slowly. But the one trick that I used to increase my reading speed considerably is, so it came out through newspaper reading. So obviously newspaper reading, if you practice your reading skills on the newspaper while you're reading the newspaper, I think that's killing 2 birds with the same stone. Because you need the newspapers for GK, you need the newspapers for the passages, as well as you're improving your reading speed. So what I did was I sort of used a technique where I used to divide the column that was there into 2 or 3 parts and sort of like go from one part to the other. So, I mean, so as an illustration, if this is the column, then you divide it 3 parts. Then the first glance should be at the leftmost part. Second glance should be the central part. Third glance should be the right part. And once you look at a certain section, you automatically get the words because I think we're all familiar with English language to the extent that we can pick up words like the articles, common adjectives, nouns very, very fast. Where you actually need to put your attention is the specifics. So for example, if the passage is on diplomacy, then you need to put attention into complex words like neighborhood first or Prime Minister Narendra Modi. So even after a certain point of time, those complex proper nouns or those key concepts get easier. So that's how I practice reading the newspapers, everything in the newspaper, and that's how I eventually managed to sort of improve my reading speed a lot. And at least in my case, it worked terribly well.
To what extent did it increase? Let's say, were you able to increase it by, let's say, 2x?
I mean, I didn't really actually know the word count, but I can definitely say that I went from being able to solve, I mean, even look at just around 100 questions on the Clat paper to being able to at least consider solving 150 questions. I attempted less than that, but I to consider solving all of them.
That's impressive. So this is something which I recommend each and every student of mine. But the problem is that, for 12 years of education, we have been taught to read from left to right. So that is how our eyes have been trained. So when we start reading from top to bottom, and rather than jumping from word to word, when we start jumping from phrase to phrase, initially your speed slows down rather than increasing because you're trying out something new. But it is generally the persistence, the practice, which helps you in mastering this technique. Chale, Shreyash, good to know that. Acha, what about legal aptitude? Earlier, people used to say that this is the only section which is new for everyone. Otherwise, we have studied everything else in our class 11th and 12th, but take 10th level maths. So what was your approach for legal aptitude? This is still the tiebreaker section that holds some importance, isn't it?
Definitely. It's a very important section because it's a tiebreaker. I mean, I know a few people with same marks. One of them made it to a particular law school, the other didn't. So yeah, definitely give a lot of importance to that. So again, the standard idea of speed reading also applies to this section because the passages are quite long and quite conceptual. There might be a few concepts you're not familiar with. For example, we had a concept like res judicata or compensation to the employee's dependents in case of the employee's death, something like that. So speed reading theory also applies here. Apart from that, what I think, what I followed personally was I sort of had a basic background knowledge, foundational knowledge of all the legal concepts. So they might be in torts law, there might be contract, there might be constitutional law, or even some legal concepts, as I said, res judicata, or yeah, concepts like that. So I read about it. Maybe I read about it through different blogs, iPleaders, even a few SCC articles. I mean, did not hesitate to go a bit ahead to what we are doing currently in law school about 6 months ago, because I think where that helped me was I was familiar with a lot of concepts about the different. So I read in detail about the different articles, right from important one, 14, 19, 21. So where that helped me is I knew the basic concept about it.
And it did help, isn't it?
Definitely.
So when you go to Consortium's website, sorry, I'm cutting you here. On the syllabus section, they have categorically mentioned that no prior legal knowledge would be required, especially in the legal aptitude section. But when we talk to students like you, when we talk to test takers, generally this is the feedback that the prior knowledge actually helps. So can you just ask our students to attend all live classes, all conceptual classes rigorously without thinking that legal में तो knowledge it's not required? Then why so many classes? Why so exhaustive classes? Isn't it?
Definitely, because I mean, if you look at the legal reasoning passage and you don't know what it's talking about, you need to spend time during the exam 2 hours. First understanding, comprehending what the concept is, thinking about it. But if you already know prior legal knowledge about it, all you have to do is read and apply. So it saves a lot of time.
Saves a lot of time, correct. And the differentiator is general knowledge, isn't it? So either it will make or mar your law school prospects. If you miss a few questions, it's also about a bit of luck, right? So before we move on to GK strategy, let me give you a different type of question. Planning, practice, perseverance, and prayer. What helped you most and in which order? So planning, practice, perseverance, and prayer.
So I think planning perseverance or practice helped me the most, followed by perseverance, followed by planning, followed by prayer. So why I think practice helped me the most is because I think, as I said, I used to score very low in my mocks, even 4 to 5 months before the exam in the 50s or 60s. But it was solely because of practice that I could manage to improve my score. And perseverance comes second because there were times where I felt burnt out. There were times where I felt very bored doing the same thing again and again, solving 2 mocks every day, 3 mocks every day, analyzing them again, solving the same sectional exercise, same pattern, reading the same newspaper again and again. But you have to keep going somewhere. I mean, it's just a matter till the Clat exam. After that, no one's going to ask you something about an article in the corner of a newspaper. So I think that's why perseverance comes next. Planning, as I said, was important because to differentiate between the board studying time, Clat studying time, and also to plan my mocks, analysis, sectional tests, when to read the newspaper and all of that. And yeah, of course, prayer, because at the end of the day, it's nothing. The results are not really in your hand. Only you can only perform. You can't determine the results by tweaking the consortium server or something. All you can do is give your best, perform, and have faith that you'll give your best.
Well, did you try out past Clat papers?
Yeah, I did. Try out the Clat 2020 paper. No, none from before that because the pattern was very different.
Okay, not specifically for Clat, but for let's say AIR-7 and other exams, even those past papers would have been of some use. Well,
yes, definitely.
Earlier there used to be 50 questions and 50 different topics could have been tested in GK, isn't it?
Right.
Now there are just 7 passages, so they are going to test only 7 passages, but questions would be much deeper or much detailed than what you would expect in, let's say, AIR-8 or some other exam. So how did you identify which topics are the most important ones? So let me take a step back. We'll go step by step. So which newspaper were you reading? I got to know that you were reading 2, isn't it?
Right.
So which 2 newspapers were you referring to, and why those 2?
The Indian Express and the Hindu. Now, why those 2 particular newspapers is because Indian Express provides a lot of, so I'm not doing any endorsement of any particular newspaper here, but it's my personal opinion that Indian Express provides a lot of background knowledge, especially through the explained columns or even in their articles, the reports, news reports, they provide a lot of background knowledge. So it might be a simple article about India and China decide to disengage at Pangong So, but that report would contain things like it was at patrol point 14, the actual length of the LAC, when did this all start, who are the major, major general on our side and the commander on their side. All of this is given in the report of Indian Express. That's why I read Indian Express. And why the Hindu is because the Hindu has a very wide coverage with respect to certain news items the Indian Express won't cover. So very, very small details like transfer of high court judges or something like that. So that's something that's there in the Hindu.
Charlie, so how much time did it take up? So every day reading 2 newspapers,
Yeah, a considerable amount of time. So I actually spent about 4 to 5 hours on GK every day.
Okay.
Immediately in the morning.
And newspaper took a good chunk of that time.
Yeah, my GK was almost exclusively newspapers. I took up static GK only in the last 1 month or so.
So were you also taking down notes when you were reading newspaper?
Not really, but if there was something very important, which I think would be there in the exam, sort of a milestone in human history, you can say. For example, the Prime Minister's visit to Bangladesh, or the Jammu and Kashmir delimitation, the Gupkar agreement, and all of that. So very important things I took notes upon, but not always.
Okay. Chale, so taking down notes of only important, crucial things, but reading 2 different newspapers.
But reading all of them. Like
somebody is not in the habit of reading newspapers. Somebody is not used to it. Which paper would you recommend? Shall someone start with Indian Express, or is it okay to start with Hindu?
So if you're going to read just one newspaper, in my opinion, I think Indian Express would be better because of the background information, as I said, that they provide about the various events that take place, also the explain section, also their editorials and the opinions, because I noticed that a lot of passages in the logical reasoning at the reading comprehension section were actually from the newspaper, and they were the opinions or the editorials from Indian Express. I recollected reading them in Indian Express, so I think that's why I would recommend this one if you're just reading one.
Okay, so how many mocks did you take in total?
About I don't know the exact count, but it would be about 120 to 150.
Okay, so in the last 3 months, what did you do different?
Pretty much devoted my entire day to thinking about Clat, preparing for Clat 24/7.
Can you go hour by hour? Like, how did your day start? When did you by what time were you free from your daily chores? And how did you plan your day out? Like, aaj mujhe kya karna hai? Were you planning, let's say, long term, like 3 months plan, or were you planning a day at a time or a week at a time?
So I was planning a day at a time, most a week at a time. But I knew that the cycle is going to continue for 3 months. Like every day is going to be the same. As they say, then the road to success is getting used to being bored. So I mean the same routine repeated again and again. So going hour by hour, after I woke up, I made sure that I worked out for at least an hour or so, because I think that really clarifies my mind, helps me set for the day, also keeps me physically fit. So after the workout, I used to read the newspapers, and that used to, as I said, take up 4 or 5 hours. And by the time I was done with the newspapers, it was already midday. After midday, from about 12 noon to 1 p.m. till the evening, about 8 to 8:30 p.m., I was engrossed in mocks and solving sectional tests. So I regularly solve 2 mocks a day. So mock takes about 2 hours, 2 hours, and then it has to be the analysis part is very important, because mock is just solving. Analysis is understanding the mock in detail, elaborately. So if you spend 1 hour or 2 hours on mock, you have to spend about an hour, 2 hour and a half on analysis. So that takes the whole process of solving one mock is about 4 hours long. And that's why I think I took about 7 to 8 hours to solve just 2 mocks, probably less. By the time it was 8:30, I was done with solving my 2 mocks for the day and a couple of sectional tests, maybe one for English or logical reasoning, one for legal aptitude, and one either for GK or Quant. So such 3 sectional tests were sort of like a standard format. And after that, well, I didn't really do anything. I mean, from 9 to beyond 9 p.m., I just sort of relaxed.
Following a regime or routine like that one requires a lot of determination. And many people will get bored and, in between, they will feel demotivated. How are you keeping yourself motivated all the time with all that thing going on? Boards cancel hoga, nahi hoga, karna hai, nahi karna hai, selection hona hai, nahi hona hai. What
It was
keeping you calm?
It was also terribly hard, because there was the boards were hanging by a thread, and then there was a lot of human tragedy too, because of the second wave and all of the depressing news coming in. So it was very hard. As I said, there were moments where I didn't do anything for a day or two, but I think you have to. The important point here is to realize that it is a limited process. It's just 2-3 months, and after the 2-3 months, as someone who went through that process, I can assure every single aspirant that you won't regret the hard work. You won't regret the the very grueling regime. In fact, you would come to appreciate it. You'd come to appreciate the kind of person you become at the end of that grueling regime after everything is done. The kind of work ethic you develop. As I say, if you want to shine like a sun, you first have to burn like a sun. So I think the burning like a sun part is very important, and I can assure you that it would be worth it.
So, Shreyash, what are your future plans? Are you planning to get into corporate, or is UPSC in somewhere in the pipeline, or you're going to figure out at a later stage?
Yeah, I think I've entered law school with a clean slate, so I don't have any preconceived notions about anything. So I'll explore a lot of internships, courses. We have a lot of seminar courses too, so all of that, and then probably figure out after in my last year or something.
ठीक है, चलिए. So बढ़िया बताइए, any final piece of advice for these young kids? Then we'll try to take up a few questions from the chat section.
Yeah, so my final piece of advice to everybody would be to stress on the importance of practice and consistency. So as Sir also mentioned, please attend all the sessions that your coaching institute, for example, IMS had the GK live sessions or legal concept clearing classes. Please attend all of that, because if you're not confident of being able to grasp all those concepts by yourself, those classes are going to help you a lot. And attend those consistently. Even if you skip one class, you're missing out on a concept that might be there in the exam. So consistency, be consistent. Don't ever feel like it's all futile, because it's not. Even if you don't, let's say, top the exam, you still come out as a better human being at the end of the process. And second is practice. Practice. And I can't stress on it enough, because I have seen my score go from somewhere in the 50s to something in the 110s, like 114.25 final score. So that was all because of practice, entirely because of practice. I can vouch that with confidence. Yeah, practice and consistency, two very important Clat tips.
So practice and consistency. So I'm going through the comment section, and some of the general feeling that I'm getting is that most of these kids are in complete state of awe right now. How did you manage in 3 months? How did you manage it along with your class 12th? So how are you planning your day along with your board studies? So Well, guys, all of these questions were taken up by Shreyas. You can just rewind the video if you want to go through it again, or if you want me to pressurize him to reiterate everything what he said earlier, we can also do that on public demand. Okay, couple of things would be: when did you start reading newspaper? Was it part of your daily routine before you started preparing for CLAT, or is it something you adapted to because of your CLAT preparation?
Right, so I read the newspaper. So I had a habit of reading the newspaper right since my ninth grade. So I didn't really feel complete to start my day until I read the newspaper in the morning. That was since ninth grade. But in ninth and 10, I just came over the newspaper, read the main news, just kind of got a basic overview of what's going on in the world. What I adapted for CLAT is reading the entire newspaper. Like, of course, not the advertisements, not the city sections, so not the local news, but the national news, international news, the news on economy, and the front page, as well as the editorials and opinions. And I recommend every CLAT aspirant to read all of this, even if you get bored at a point of time, because sometimes the articles are repetitive. But that's what I adopted for CLAT, a specific strategy is to read it every day, the whole thing.
Okay, there's a question that how did you go through the gruel? Achha. So that is already taken care of. There was a lot of pressure, obviously boards and everything going on. Did you read editorial? Yes, he did. He read all the editorials from both the newspapers. Okay. Is it wise to complete all the concepts by December 2021 and then start mocks from January 2022? Or is it okay to start mocks early?
I think it's okay to start mocks early because, so I'm not saying you have to solve one mock a day at this stage for 2022 aspirants, but at least you should have a basic idea of what a mock looks like, just the pattern of the exam. However, become more intense with the mocks after January, February. And yes, definitely clear all your concepts by December, because later you won't get time for that.
Okay. Did you maintain a diary for your daily study plan? These are, most of these are fan questions. So students are just getting more inspired and they just want to hear again and again from you. No, this is not that important. This is more important. So did you make notes for everything? He has already said that he used to make notes for the most important things as far as GK is concerned, current affairs is concerned, but not for each and everything. And it makes sense. You can't keep on writing each and everything down. Otherwise, your written notes would pile up like anything and you will find it difficult to revise. So a question to add on to that one would be, how often did you revise whatever you started? And how important do you find revisions?
So I wish I had more time for revision, but unfortunately I didn't. So all the notes I used to make, I thought that I'd be able to revise them 2 months down the line, 3 months down the line. But as the mock schedule became more intense, as the sectional tests became more intense, and as I got more focused on being able to get into that exam pattern of being able to solve those questions within the 2 hours in a marks oriented manner, because at the end of the day, you want more marks. I mean, it's no secret that everyone wants more marks. So as I got more marks oriented, I had to become less concept. I mean, I didn't have much time to revise the concepts again and again. So after a certain point of time, I adapted to the strategy that when I wrote it down the most important stuff specifically, because writing down will help me remember it better. And after a point, it was just once. I mean, just under my for my perusal once, and then it was over.
Repetitive editorials also work as revision.
Definitely.
अच्छा, ये बताइए श्रेयस, in what sequence did you take your actual CLAT exam? So which section did you go with first, and what would you advise others?
Right, so for the actual CLAT exam, I went with the English, the reading comprehension section first, followed by the GK section, followed by the logical reasoning section, followed by the legal reasoning section, at the end, the quantitative aptitude section. But this was a order I sort of figured out for myself after a lot of trial and error. So, I mean, when I started out preparation, the order was completely different. I used to do Quant first. Then I realized that doesn't work out. Then I used to do legal first. I mean, there were a lot of permutations and combinations that went on into this final order. And this final order I came to follow for the last 2-3 months. So I was pretty confident that this is the order that works the best. And that's what I used for the actual exam.
Yes. So no one size fits all. You have to find it out for yourself. What works best for you, guys? Do it, experiment a bit, try it out, use different strategies in each and every upcoming mock. Mock 3 is scheduled on 9th this month. I hope all of you have started working towards it. Take a aim, take a target कि मुझे इतना score करना ही करना है, and find out वो score कहाँ से आएगा. And as Shreyas rightly pointed out, after the mock, spend some time. If you're giving 2 hours to a mock, please give at least one or 1.5 hours to analyzing your mistakes. Unless you analyze your mock performance, you won't be able to improve. Every, what we this question we get every year, that after, let's say, 3-4 mocks, we hit a glass ceiling. Your score will somehow start stagnating in a range, so 70 to 75, or let's say 80 to 85. How to break that ceiling? Did you face any such phase in your preparation journey? ऐसा हुआ आपके साथ?
Yeah, definitely. So that is a very, very well observed phenomenon. I think hitting a glass ceiling with respect to your mock scores, you somehow believe that you cannot go beyond that. And then if unfortunately that ceiling happens to be in the 80s or 90s, students often think very, very wrongly that that's all I can do, that's all I'm capable of, and I can't go beyond that. So I should just give up all hopes for getting into good law schools. But that's definitely not the case. That's definitely not the case. Where I think when you hit a glass ceiling, where you're lacking is the analysis. Because when you analyze, you learn something more. When you analyze, you learn the difference between your current score and your potential score. And if you've hit a glass ceiling, that means all the concepts that you're solving well, you're an expert at it. But there's still something more that you need to solve. I think that difference can be covered through analysis, regular analysis.
Each and every mark counts. So whether you're scoring, let's say, 0.25 more than others, that means you're going to a better college than others. So there's a question that how could you manage both CBSE and Clat? I think this is repetitive, Tanvi, so I will have to skip this one. What's your age? Sachin, now you are getting personal here. So you should not be asking people their age. But yes, he did it in his first go. So that is to clear out some of the doubts. 3 months, last 3 months, rigorous preparation when the board's confusion was, let's say, somewhat over, and everybody was sure कि इस साल तो नहीं हो पाएगा. And that is when he started driving in the top gear. So otherwise also, everyone has his or her own journey. So whatever he did, if you start replicating each and every step, doesn't mean that you will also reach the same destination. It also depends on which vehicle are you using, what are your motoring skills, and what are you really good at. So identify yourself, look at your strengths and weaknesses, and prepare a strategy based on your persona, rather than copying each and everything what Shreyas says. So he has made very good point in each and every question that we raised up. So obviously Sachin will not going to take up that question. Age to nahi karenge. How did you practice maths? This could be, if you can elaborate a bit more, because you are facing difficulties in Quant, right? So what did you do different about it? Did you identify topics कि मुझे 7-8 score करना है तो यही areas I'm going to solve, or did you start finding solutions to the problem areas कि मुझे तो सारा आना चाहिए?
About maths, I had maths in my 12th grade too, because I had PCM. So, however, let me just point out that the maths I had in 11th grade, in 11th and 12th grade for my high school was completely different from the maths we had at Clat, because in Clat, we mostly have data interpretation, wherein you're given a problem and you interpret the data. So what I did was, I think the Quant section comes a lot to how you solve the paper, also in addition to the way you solve it. I mean, the problem solving skills for the particular problem. So what I did was, I also iterated this in the previous session, but I'll do it again because I think it's very important, is that as you look at the 15 questions, I should take one passage or one data set. I used to just simply read it, figure out whatever I could in a very sort of a first reading, figure out whatever I could, move to the questions, move to those 5 questions quickly, solve only those I could solve in a very easy manner at the first glance or intuitively, like just the sort of answers that just come, the sort of answers that can be solved with a few calculations, not too many calculations, because you do not have time, honestly, in those 2 hours to spend on doing very, very long calculations as may be required. So I think that's a sort of a trick and a hack to score more. Of course, you cannot get 15, and I did not reasonably expect that I would get 15. But if you just move on to the questions and solve those, you can, leave those you can't, and then just move on to the next question. Then I think that's how I sort of did that. I did not practice too much for it, but yeah. Anyways, you get about 10 minutes to do that. So in 10 minutes, all you can do is just check which questions you can. However, second point is that if you spend too much time on one passage, instead of doing, as I said, moving on and looking at the next 10 questions, what happens is there might be a few questions in the next set or the set after that, that you would have been able to solve, but you didn't get the opportunity to see them because you spent too much time in the previous question. So avoid that. Get as many marks as you can by just looking at it first glance, figuring out if you can solve it.
So I can say that it is important to know which question to solve and more important to know which question to skip. Exactly. So Suresh, you said that we should give only 10 minutes to a particular section. So how much time was this a mental sectional time limit that you have set for yourself? Yeah,
no. I mean, no, I don't really think we should give 10 minutes to each section. So it always used to happen that for the quant section, I used to have just 5 to 10 minutes because the entire paper was so lengthy that or sometimes no time left at all. But for the other sections, I did have a mental plan of how much time to spend on the sections. So for the reading comprehension section, I spent about 25, at the most 30 minutes. If I didn't solve it in 30 minutes, I used to just kind of move fast, only answer those, or the remaining questions, only answer those I'm definitely confident of because there's negative marking. However, for most exams, I mean, for most a standard test, it's 25 minutes is, I think, was enough for me. For the legal section, legal reasoning, I spent about 35 to 40 minutes. For logical reasoning, I spent about 20 to 25 minutes because there the passages were a bit shorter. And for GKI, I spent about just 5 minutes. So I did not read the whole passage. And that's where I think the importance of reading newspaper comes up, because when you read the word Indo-China conflict, you know what they're talking about. And you already have read the newspaper, known all the facts, so you can just answer the questions.
Okay, so sectional time limit based on your strengths and weaknesses, how comfortable you are with a particular section, particular subject, right? So even if you know all the questions, but if you're not able to solve it in, let's say, a fixed time limit, you will have to skip it for a moment. You can always come back to the question once you're done with your entire question, right? So Suresh, that worked for him, and I think it will work for anybody who wants to crack this exam. How many questions did you leave in the exam? So what was your attempt, if you remember that? How many questions did you attempt and how many?
Right. So I think in my first, the very first reading of newspaper, sorry, not newspaper, the Clat paper, I think as I said, I just went to the questions I'm definitely confident of. So in that way, I could solve about 115 to 120, 100% confident. Of course, I didn't get all of them right, but yeah, most of them right. Then after that, as Sir said, leave some questions for later if you can't solve them immediately. So that way, I had about 8 to 10 questions, which I did in my second reading, which was 5 minutes left. I just kind of got back to the questions I had skipped. And all in all, I solved 128 questions, attempted 128 questions. I don't know how many I got right, but 114.25 was the score. So maybe you can do the math.
Okay, so you attempted so many mocks, many times you would have scored really well. Sometimes you had a setback. So there's a question. So Ruchi says that what was your lowest score in any of the mocks that you attempted?
Well, I think as far as I can remember, it was 52 in one of the very first mocks I solved. That was, I think, in March or April of 2021, when I got about 52. So after getting that after seeing that I'm scoring 52, I was really, I really thought that this is not the score I want. So after that, I sort of moved into high gear, started practicing with consistency. And then it still took about 2 months to go from 50 to 80. It still took about 2 months to go from 80 to 100. And after that, finally, it was somewhere above 100. So don't expect overnight that your score will move from 50 to 120.
So persistence matters.
Persistence, right.
Shali, so can you suggest any good source for quant other than the coaching material? So any external news source that you were referring to, some news portals?
Personally speaking, I just solved what was there in the coaching material, because as I mentioned, I was not very, very laser focused on quant, because most of the times it was left out anyway. So to be very honest, because I had to optimize the time too. But apart from that, I think the maths, the kind of concepts that there are, won't be found in any other math textbook. Like it's not integration or calculus, something like that. So I mean, I just refer to those coaching material.
Devashi has a question here, that what was your thought process? What was going through your mind when you scored very low and when you scored very well?
So speaking of when I scored very low, and I think that thought process is more important. when I scored very low, I focused more on the analysis, because so the logic is simple. I mean, if you're scoring low, that means you're not getting as many questions right as you should. And in order to get as many questions right as you should know why you're going wrong there. And to know why you're going wrong, you need to analyze. And only if you analyze enough sectional tests, enough mocks, automatically you sort of start to absorb the thinking process that goes into solving the particular peculiar Clat problem. So I was clueless as to how to solve critical reasoning, reading comprehension when I used to get 50, 60. So at that time, only after a lot of analysis did I figure out the specific, and Clat is a very peculiar sort of thinking process that has to go into solving the Clat paper. So that I sort of picked up due to analysis. So analysis was my default sort of mechanism after I got low score. And even after I got high score, I sort of went back to the paper and checked whatever I got right as well as what I got wrong. Because when you're preparing, your aim should be 150 out of 150. You know you're not getting it, but that should be the aim, because why not? If you aim for the stars, you fall in the moon, right? So even when I got high score, my default mode used to be analysis till the very end.
So aim for perfection so that you can land on excellence.
Yeah, I mean, there's no perfection, obviously, but there can be perfect effort. That's something I read back in school.
Chali, great. So there's so many questions, but I think we took a lot, and you was such a sport. You took up so many questions today, Shreyash. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
Enlightening of the students. Everybody was crucial, interested to know what went through your mind. How did you decide? When did you start? So it doesn't really matter when you start. But what is going to matter more is that once you start, once you have a goal in mind, your preparation begins from that very moment. And then if you consistently start working towards it, you will end up achieving it. So with this note, I will hand over to Shreyash if you want to say any last word to all these kids before we end this session today.
Right. So first of all the very best for your Clat 2022, Clat 2023, whatever batch you are from. Also, one last parting word is that don't get scared or don't get intimidated. Don't think that it's something not achievable. Don't keep obsessing over the cutoffs. Don't keep obsessing over the number of seats in your dream university. Don't try to constantly think about the result. Think about the effort. Think about the process. Think about the questions you got wrong. And that way your fear of the unknown, because of course the result is an unknown thing before you're giving the exam. You don't know the result. So that way your fear of the unknown will be significantly reduced. If your only goal is in your efforts, only thing you can do at the moment is put in as much efforts as you can, give your best. That's the only thing you can do. And if you do that, the results will automatically follow, because that's something that is obviously not in your hands. And one last parting thought, which I personally, like, from very personal perspective, is that take good care of your health, both mental health and physical health, because Clat is a very grueling process. Like I said, 3 months were very, very hectic, very, very, as Sir mentioned last session, inhumane. But you cannot achieve all of that. You cannot sustain with that schedule unless and until you take good care of your health. So just leave some time aside to take good care of your health, exercise, eat well, sleep well, because you cannot go on for 3 months or 5 months if you're not in a good shape.
That's so you used to exercise every day, right? So every morning your day used to start with exercising. So, so which routine do you follow? Are you into yoga, muscle training, or something? Or something?
No. I just did some jogging and some breathing exercises. That's all. Just to kind of make sure that I'm in a state of mind to go through that 10-hour study routine.
It also helps you to calm down when your anxiety level is high. So exercising is part and parcel of your preparation, guys. So please make sure that you're taking very good care of your health. You're taking good care of your mind. Mental peace is equally important. Don't get bogged up with all this competition that is going around. Kya hoga, kaise hoga. Don't let anxiety take over you. Rather, you have to control it. So that is the final word. We'll end it here today. Thank you so much for joining us, Shreyash. Thank you so much, guys, for attending this session. So hit the like button, click share, subscribe. बांटने से ज्ञान बढ़ता है और साथ में subscribers भी. So with this note, I will end it here. Thank you, Shreyash.
Thank you so much. My pleasure.
All the best for your future journey.
Thank you so much.